Well, I'm very happy to see you. Some of the people I do know, but I'm sure you're all into the arts. So please excuse me if I start telling you things that you know and don't need to be reminded of. So perhaps I should say my training has been as a classical musician. Until the age of 30, I played in the Halle Orchestra. Okay. Even then, I had no concept of transferring to any of the other arts. But I was always attracted to art since a childhood, since my childhood. And color was very important. Rhythm, which is in music, goes through poetry, literature, and in the arts, the plastic. Do we call this plastic art? No.
Visual?
What's it called?
Visual.
Visual arts, that's right. So therefore, it seemed to me natural when I jumped into starting collage. But this is 30 years ago. The story goes like this. I needed to buy furniture. There was a chest, a tea chest with pottery in it. My wife said, well, we don't need that, but that's a beautiful piece. It was held up. And the man said, who would give me £10 for this? Nobody raised a hand. Then he said, 5. So I said, well, whatever's in there, be worth it just trying. So I said 4. I was brave in those days. And we got it. Now at the bottom, there were 30 pieces of Cork tiles. Now, they attracted me so much because of the rough surfaces and the shades of orange and ochre, deep browns. And I thought, well, I'm all for recycling. I'll do something with collage. And in that new house we'd got in Wales, there were some half-used rolls of wallpaper. So the very first ones, but first of all, before I jump into that, I should say I did these collage, these batiks, and these are the only 3 I have left. These are small compared with the big pieces I used to do. And that was a technique of melted wax, you probably know all that, and dyeing. My whole thing in those days were very close colors, shades of the same color. So in the early 60s, this idea of purple and pink wasn't very much accepted in heels, but somehow I did sell them. And so there is another one with grays and browns on a purple base, which doesn't look purple anymore. And this is the last one, which again were very close colors in those days. But here are the 30 bases of the collage which was to come, using wallpaper and these shapes. They were very simple, basic shapes, really, but they developed, and eventually I mounted them. And my wife said, why don't you go into a charity shop, buy some frames? She was the first one who started that part of my life. And that was the first in this first series of collages, which were finished. That's the second one. And these were all shown about 10 years ago at the Bear Steps Gallery. And unfortunately, Roger Cray, who ran that gallery, and you probably all know, was supposed to come today, but he phoned about an hour ago and said, look, I'm developing a cold and a cough. And I said, well, I was very sorry not to see him. There is this third one, 4th. This is in the order that they were done. See, they got rather complicated in those days. I used maybe 30 pieces. I've reduced a lot since then. But they're all on Cork tiles, and they were framed, sometimes cut to fit the frames, because naturally when you buy a frame, most people frame the work when it's finished. In those days, I thought it was interesting to buy the frames and do something for the frame. All gone, by the way. Now, that was the first one-man show I had, and that was, again, as I mentioned, in the Bear Steps Gallery. And again, there was a sort of fortuitous thing that I was promised the ground floor, and then 2 weeks before the show, Roger said, by the way, you've got plenty of stuff. Fill up the second one. The guy at the top was pulled out. So I had a short notice for that, but there are no photographs at this stage. The next one was in the Gateway, and actually of the same year. Now, this is the start of recently on the form of cork tiles, but fake cork tiles. And this was supplied by Anne, and she owns the first and the second of this series, which is called Squares, Circles, and Shapes. Now, of course, with shapes, you can get away with everything. So they're not always true to the title. Yeah, that's number 1, and that's number 2. They are yours. And then they went on trying to experiment with color, form, and more simplicity here. What I call simplicity. Okay, there is another. By that time, I was drawing on the card or the paper, as you can see, and it progressed. Now, here I was using the size. I think it's called A1 size, and I liked the idea of plain paper for a while on a background, but using form and space. I'm very interested in the element of space. Can you call it an element? No. What is it? You can? Okay.
Malcolm, can you give us an idea about how long these take? This one, for instance. How long?
Oh, how to make it?
Yes.
Well, I'm very reluctant to say that because they have to go very quickly. Otherwise, I can't work. It has to go. And yes, how long? The cutting goes very fast. And I accept what the scissors want to do. I can't always control the scissors because I use a very large pair of scissors and work very fast. I don't go snip, snip, snip. Some people think I go very slowly with that, but it goes plonk, plonk, zoom, or nothing. And that's why the things have to go with a swing or they don't work with me. The longer part of it is marking where they should go, and then the last part, the gluing. So even these very large ones don't take longer than the small ones. Anyway, that's very good. Has that answered? Now there is another one of this sort of austere type of no color and just form and space. In fact, this series, I think, was called S&B, Space and Balance.
And Malcolm, you've got 2 circles in that one.
Which one?
This one that's on the screen.
Yeah.
2 circles in it.
Yeah.
Do they get drawn or teacups?
Well, I once showed off in front of you, Anne, and showed I could do it freehand. It's the scissors. I call it the magic scissors, right? The magic scissors does the work. But I do let it go. And if it doesn't come out as a circle, I get away with an oval or cut it in 2. But nothing is wasted. Ray, who is operating at the back, asked years ago, do I ever throw anything away? And then I had to think, no, why should I? Because everything's recycled. You see, so yes, those circles just happen. Nobody knows how and why. No, this is a big swish, but this is not that large size. This is usually the size like this. Or maybe, anyway, I can't remember. This is some years ago. And there is another just plain wallpaper or card. Where there is there, I don't know if you can see it, the texture.
Yes, it
It's marvellous because I'm very, very interested in the texture, because I don't know what you call this in wallpaper when it's beveled.
Embossed paper.
Yeah,
Embossed.
embossed. So that, again, you can even paint over it, as everybody would know, and it doesn't come with a pure solid paint. And that, again, is interesting from my point of view of texture. Okay, now this one goes into wallpaper, where I started painting on large pieces of wallpaper, then cutting through, sometimes following the rhythm, sometimes going across the rhythm, because in music, as you all know, to get a cadence, there's got to be some disharmony leading up to the final chord. To me, music and rhythm and harmony and disharmony are all related. Okay, so the next one again, this circle was when I made your piece there. So you actually have it, I think. You chose it years later. Now here is a half circle with a form, because I can get away with form, whatever, because of the shape is a form. It doesn't fit into a square, but there is part of a square there, a part of a circle. And the other part is there. So this is a twin. I can't remember if that's been sold. No, probably not. Now, this was when I found an advertisement for a jewellery exhibition in the Tate. I think it was the Tate. But it was so interesting because of the texture of the jewels. So again, it is a sort of austere cut. But at that stage, I was looking for that very much. Here is another one, which is number 2 of that series. But there's a circle there at the bottom, which was probably the border. Yeah. Now here, for rhythm and things like that, you can, as you all know, you can paint and cut through print, where there is that, and tearing also, you don't have to cut. Well, you all know that. Now let's see what this one is. Now here is an austere type of piece, using printed material, but also this sort of unbalance, which I prefer. I sometimes like that. In fact, what I'm working at this very moment is balance, imbalance. To me, the poetry of movement and shape can exist with it not really being an acceptable form of balance.
Can I just ask, when you're calling it balance and imbalance,
Yeah.
you must be talking about areas within a composition that are
Yes.
What, are you looking for a balance or an imbalance in the tone?
Both. You see, the whole thing about it is I don't really call imbalance. To me, the poetry of movement and weight can be the heaviest part at the top. Does it work?
So it's a kind of balance, really.
It is a kind of balance. But you know, balance is the eye of the beholder, like beauty. In my way, according to my dessert, is that the right word? Now, this again, somebody gave me a book, I think, on Art Deco. And it was torn, it was sort of, pages could not be all used, but some of them were very interesting shapes. And I think this was an advertisement for lighting and architecture. So I thought, well, it's beautiful paper. I will use these pieces. And there's about a series, and I think you have several of these. Yeah, there's another one. Does it go right to the bottom? Yes. See, now I think that was glass. And I got the idea, because at that stage, although this was printed in Holland, there were extracts in English, and it said, in Dada, they never threw anything away. They used anything, and it was a very short period with the Dadaists. And then one woman had said, and I can't remember her name, that we don't throw anything away. We even cut each other's work up to use. Once I heard that, I thought, well, I'm not going as far as that to use original.
You've got all the excuses now.
Yeah, but I've not cut up people's work. No. But I love the idea, the daring of it all. Yes, so that's the history of that. Now, this is the last series, so this will only take maybe 10 minutes at the very most. This is called painted paper, PP. And again, it's exclusively on large stretches of wallpaper and chopped up, or cut, should we say, or torn. And that was number 1. And all these now that you will see of this size, A1 size, which again, Ray and Vicky were the first people to give me these large sizes. And I should say, Michelle was the first person to find frames as big as that. Do you remember? And there you are. Now there is what I thought was a breakthrough with form. Small pieces with large sweeps. All, of course, abstract, but painted. Sometimes I paint on the right side, but very often on the wrong side. So creeping through, you would get what was the original. And that was an interesting piece, that I cut the circle first and then stuck pieces on and then cut again. But again, it was daring because I had to risk cutting through 2 sheets of paper.
With your scissors?
With the magic scissors. Yeah, I never use a razor, no, what do you call those? Yeah, those knives. I know they're very handy, but too dangerous for me. Okay, now that's again the same sort of idea of using piles. Well, you know this is now, again, it was all from one piece of paper, but strange brushwork, which again you can't always control because you could do it like wax. Suddenly it flows very quickly and you can get very good effects when it cracks and the dye seeps through. But if you do small bits, they hold. Now with that, you feel, or I felt, it looks as if it was a figure with a hat on. But it just happened like that. I can't apologize if it's not totally abstract. Now, there again, you see, it's a case of balance, although this is just painted paper. Oh, that's another one where I just fringed that with pen at the edges. Yeah, I very rarely did that sort of thing. But now here was a study in emptiness and balance, and although it's top heavy, I felt then this was a sort of, you can see this as a swish, and that's a swish, and that knitted together. But I never know when I'm cutting what will happen. It can start in a portrait style and then turn into landscape. Preconceived ideas are foreign to me sometimes. That's why they go fast. I accept what's thrown at me sometimes. So there again, it balance and imbalance. But, sorry?
What about failure rate?
Failure?
Really?
Failure? did I hear right? In what
I'm just
sense?
wondering whether or not sometimes you reach a position with
Yeah.
your composition that
Yeah.
you don't like it.
Well,
Does that happen sometimes?
Well, I just accept it on principle, but it might be improvable. That's true, but as I answered Ray many years ago, I've never thrown anything away. And once I start, it goes, next one. I'm always ready for the next, by the way. A failure.
So you're not making judgments.
What? Say again.
You're not making judgments.
Well, I can make judgments in the sense that I'm happier with this one than that. But it doesn't always work that way, because somebody will say, I want to buy that one. And by the way, everything I've done for these 10 years since I've shown has gone to charity. I've never taken 1 cent to myself. Everybody who knows me will know that. And 100% of this will go to charity. That's why I hope there'll be nothing left on the wall.
The cutting process sounds very organic almost. It just happens.
Organic, well, you're right. It has to be organic, although I wouldn't be able to move on so
What
quickly.
about the next stages of it? Are they equally so? The placement?
Once I've cut and placed the things, they can't be uncut, number one. Once they're marked, and then the final thing, when they meet their glue, they can't be, their fate is sealed.
But at what point is the fate not sealed? At what point is there a move?
Well, that is something I can't really answer. It just happens. It's like many, many years ago, I was asked by a writer who's long since died, said to me, I can't understand what part of the brain does inspiration come from. And I had to think, because I was very much younger then. So I said, but his name was Roy. Roy, what makes you think inspiration comes from the brain? And that's how I've lived, with spontaneity. And judging, surely, yes. I can say I'm happier with this than that. It's the way I work. Mm-hmm.
But the critical moment is the point where you decide that's
Well, that's
where
very...
you're going to glue it, but you don't, in that point onwards, in the gluing process, you don't readjust.
Well, it's possible because something might slip.
Yeah.
And once I was working with the window open, and it was in the days when I've told you, when I used many, many pieces, and there seemed to be a strong piece, and I couldn't find it. Where is it? I marked it, and I know it was red, but I could not find it. So I thought, I've got to readapt. I've got to be flexible. So this is probably answering your question too. I turned it the other way, and I thought, oh, I can move that a bit. And it was finished, according to my sensibility.
Did you know about Matisse's sitting up in bed when he was a very old man doing all his cutouts? Did you know about all that when you were doing these?
Say again, I can't hear the beginning.
Did you know about the Matisse cutouts
Oh,
when you were doing these?
I've always known about Matisse cutouts, but I could never always visualize what they were. But recently I have seen a video of him cutting long stretches like this, and his assistant holding the end. And there were much longer pieces than I use. Yes, but I can't say, for instance, he influenced me. The influence that people might see in that are subconscious ones, because I've known the art since I was a child, and we all absorb. But Matisse was probably the second after Picasso, that period, when he was doing cutouts, which didn't last very long, did they? And Matisse only did that at the end of his life, I think, very end. Now, this is one plain color onto a decorated color. It's painted, of course, but again, is it balanced? Is it imbalanced? Although I haven't got to that series yet. But this is always a playful thing with me. There we are with bits and pieces stuck together. So there you are. This is just thrown together, which you would all understand. But does it harmonize? Does it work? Is that the right way up? Yes. Well, you know, people often say that, don't they? If it's Abstract work, you could look at it any way. Sometimes it's true. Not always, though. Yeah, well, this was a bit of a tricky one. This was very difficult. These are all cut out small little circles, rough circles, which I got the idea of using strong out of forms and this sort of silly thing, and that one suspended on the top. And it all went wrong on this side because I had marked it, but because something else fit, I realized it was going the wrong way. So I thought I'd better leave that for a bit. And then I found another piece of the same cut material, should I say. And I thought, well, if I could fit it on, it might balance a bit more. So there you are, where answering your question, it can linger on when I'm in doubt. And whether it works or not, that's not for me to say, but it did take a bit of time. Now, well, it took me. Now there again, it's just floating in the air, balance or imbalance. Oh, any questions?